I'm Dr. Misha Thompson with the U.S. Helsinki Commission. We're actually waiting for one other speaker, but we are going to go ahead and get started, and then we will just have her speak whenever she comes. So I'm Dr. Misha Thompson. I'm with the U.S. Helsinki Commission. We were set up a few decades ago to monitor the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which focuses on 57 countries, so Europe and North America, so it's the United States and Canada. And they focus on whether or not countries are abiding by human rights and other commitments. And part of those commitments actually include what they call a focus on tolerance and non-discrimination. So in 2007, our commission, and we're an independent U.S. government agency that is run by members of Congress and also includes our State Department, Commerce, and Defense Department as well. So we look like a congressional commission, but we also work really closely with our federal government. But back in 2007, Congressman Hastings actually became the first African-American chair of this commission and is currently a ranking member. And back in 2007, one of the things he said that he wanted to do was to make sure that this commission had a focus on people of African descent and other diverse communities. And so that meant he thought that there should be policies and a focus across Europe, the United States, and Canada that focused on diverse communities. And so that was 2007. And as you see here, we are today with a panel full of persons that are in power across Europe. And these are civil society leaders as well as political leaders. And so today our panel is actually going to focus on what is happening in Europe and how it is very similar and in some cases different than what's happening in the United States, but also what opportunities that holds for both communities going forward on both sides of the Atlantic. And so with that, I will turn the microphone over to Councilman Jallo Mamadou, and I'm actually so proud to say councilman because when Jallo and I first came to know each other, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, he was an activist in Sweden fighting for his community. And he was in Sweden, and then he moved to Brussels, which became the national umbrella organization for the European Union. And now he's a councilman in his community fighting for rights, both at the domestic and national level. And so with that, I will have Jallo have some words today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Misha Thompson. First of all, I would like to thank Congressman Elsie Hastings for hosting us and for really doing everything possible to bring together both civil society and policymakers across the Atlantic so that we can exchange ideas and build allies and work together in order to create change. As Dr. Thompson mentioned, we are here with a delegation. We've been doing that for the past 3 years, and thanks to Dr. Thompson and Alex Johnson that's also here. Please, Alex, they're doing a fabulous job in trying to really build this relationship across the transatlantic. I will start by, I was given the privilege to introduce a very prominent person that has been working tirelessly for the rights of our communities, but also to create change. A person that has been a role model for a lot of people, including myself, a person that has been leading by doing, a person that has great intellect and insight. And I cannot find the right words to introduce this individual without doing her injustice. To my right here, the former minister, Justice Minister in France, Christian Taubira. We are very excited that you are able to join us today because, as I said, I've always seen you, and I know many people in my circle seen you as a role model in the work that you do and the fight that you're leading for progress and change, positive change in France and in Europe. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you. Please give her a round of applause. I also wanted to just quickly highlight that some of our members, delegation members are here. Karin, please. Karin is a member of the European Network Against Racism, which it's the biggest network, anti-racist network in Europe. And we have Alpheus sitting somewhere here too. Alpheus, there you go. Alpheus is working at the European Parliament, an intergroup that works with regards to anti-racism and diversity issues. And we have, let me see here. Sanjukta is here from OSF.
She's not here yet.
She's not here. She's not. And Daniel, where's Daniel? Daniel is there. Daniel's working, he's from Germany, and working with civil society and doing really a great job in Germany in making sure that issues concerning our communities are raised and creating change. So we try to do our best to make sure that we mobilize the young leaders with great potential, try to build their capacity, but also use that the capacity and the experience that we have from Europe, try to come here, build bridges, because we have a lot in common. Some of the realities that we face or you face here in the United States are exactly the same realities that we face in Europe. And it's important that we join forces and work together in order to be able to have a chance in defeating these challenges that we face. Lastly, I just want to mention my organization, the European Network Against Racism, published this report. I'm going to put some of the report, copies of the report here so you can have a look at them. It's Afrophobia in Europe. Afrophobia is what we call anti-black racism in the United States. It's the first of its kind, and it's published where we looked at over 24 different countries. We mapped some of the realities that black people are facing in those countries in Europe so that people can have an idea as to how it looks, you know, the living conditions of black people in Europe. So please take your time and read through it, and it's available online. With that said, so thank you so much.
So really quickly, we're actually going to turn the mic over very quickly to Sanyuta Morthy, who just walked in, and then we will turn the mic back over to the Honorable Christian Tuvira.
Hi. So I work at Open Society Foundations for the European program for the anti-discrimination team, and part of our work is to work with basically all the minorities in Europe. And we handle especially what we call people of African descent, as Jalo was mentioning just now, as well as what we call Black Europeans. So their identity both as Africans within their community as well as Europeans in a broader European context. And it's been a very exciting few days with our partners from Europe in this room and at this table to present our work and the findings of our work over the last few years, as well as to learn from our counterparts in the US and partners that we've got here, lessons that we can take back home. And we've been realizing a lot that there are so many similarities in both the experience of the US civil rights movement in the 60s, as well as what we're going through in Europe now. There is a lot of potential for collaboration. But it was interesting as well, we came here, or at least I certainly did, with the impression that we would have so many lessons to learn from the American experience, and it would be so enriching for us. But I'm so proud and so happy of our work in Europe that we had a lot to share that was inspirational for our American counterparts as well. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And I apologize for just coming in right now, so this is all quite off the cuff. But I hope that we can present to you today some of our most proud achievements over the past few years. So I'll turn it back over to the panel. Thank you.
All right. Just a minute, Simon. I forgot a very important person that I really need you to. Simon, he's just outside the door.
Okay,
Simon is one of the really, you know, I normally use this euphemism. If you have a duck in a pond and you see it floating really majestically, you think nothing's happening until you look down and you see the feet. Simon is the feet. We're sitting here, we're talking, but Simon is the one that makes everything happen. And I really, if he was here, I really wanted you to give him a round of applause so you know he's the guy that makes things happen in Europe, and without him, we wouldn't be here today. Thank you so much, Simon. Yeah?
And with that, we will now hear a few words from the Honorable Christian Tuvira. So, please.
Thank you, Dr. Misha Thompson. Ladies and gentlemen, I understood that I'm supposed to speak 5 minutes. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So, what can I tell you in 5 minutes? It's really a short time, isn't it? Well, so rather to fly over a few ideas, or even to focus on a single idea, because I don't know a lot of ideas you can clear up during such a short time either. So I propose to to talk about the French law relevant to slave trade and slavery as a crime against humanity. Because I know there's a debate here in your country about this. So if you will allow me, I use it as a European experience upon race, rights, and politics. This law was adopted after a 2.5 parliamentarian debate beginning on January 1999, ending on May 2001. It was very, very tough. It was very, very tough because it was very hard to lead the French institution to admit that France, the great France, was a pro-slavery state. In the collective memory, people remembered that France abolished slavery. They even didn't know that France abolished slavery twice. Once in 1794, the second time in 1848. That means that slavery was restored. It was restored by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802. So in people's mind, there is a kind of disconnection between abolishing slavery and practicing slavery. Probably because slavery was run in far territories, far colonies, in South America, in Caribbean countries, in Indian Ocean. But in people's mind, France was a state who abolished slavery, but they couldn't understand that France practiced slavery. And I remember I had a debate, a radio debate, and a guy said to me, he was a mayor of a big city in France, and he said to me, "You are putting shame on France, because what you don't know is that France abolished slavery." I said, France abolished slavery, she practiced. He started shouting, "You're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar." So, just to explain you how it was hard for some people to realize that France had been a pro-slavery state. Anyway, this debate, this legislative debate we had in the parliament, the French parliament, settled the issue in the French society. It became a little bit smoother, but a little bit harder too. What is important is to understand what is inside this law. This law, in its article first, in its first article, Article 1, this law recognizes, admit, make an official and solemn recognition of slave trade and slavery as a crime against humanity. It's a beginning of reparation. It's not all reparation, but it's beginning of reparation. Why? Because saying that it is a crime against humanity is recognizing that slaves were human beings. That's very important because they were goods. They were sold. They were captured and sold. So that's the beginning of a reparation. But I still do believe that the crime itself can be repaired. Anyway, we have to consider the consequences of the crime and work in order to correct or to stop the consequences of the crime. That's what reparation is about. We start with obligation to teach this history. In the law, Article 2, make obligation for Ministry of Education to teach this history from primary school until university. That's an obligation. Article 3 sets a date for the President of France to chair a ceremony of remembrance each year at May 10th. It's an official and solemn remembrance ceremony. This law creates also a national committee on history and memory. This committee has responsibility to deal with actions, exhibitions, teaching, all kind of things, awards too, all kind of things, and this national committee works very, very well. Finally, in this law, there is a disposal that forbid denying slave trade and slavery as a crime against humanity. So it's a very short presentation of this law, but I do believe that I had to share that with you, as I know that some strong characters in this country, some eminent personality, I think about Reverend J.C. Jackson, for instance, a late Senator Owens, I think about Dr. Sefoke. There are people who, since so many years, are working hard, speaking high, convincing, working, struggling in order to put this history at the core, in the core of the way America thinks about itself. It seems to me a struggle that deserves our connection and to try to overcome. Thank you.
So thank you so much. I think you can just hear from the legislation she was not only able to introduce in her country, but I think the vision that she set for the world in terms of, I think, recognition of not only atrocities, but also how that should become part of our collective memory and help to move things forward is so important. And I think what's really telling by her last comment is this is something that the United States continues to need to look at and reflect upon, because we don't have these laws in our own country as well. And I thought she was very diplomatic in how she framed that at the end. And so I just want to say thank you so much for being here and also just being such a visionary for the world. With that, we are going to move into our second panel, and so I would ask the panelists that aren't yet here to please come sit on this side of the table, and then we will begin. So Saeed, okay, exactly, and then Panzu. And just you'll notice we actually have interpreters as well that are at the table, et cetera. So so that's why we're going to be using different mics and doing a few other things that you might not see at some other panels today.
Yeah, I would like to welcome you. My name is Gün Tang. I'm also from Germany and working over there as a commissioner for migration integration in the city of Berlin. In Europe, we are talking about a crisis. We are talking about the refugee crisis, I actually would say we don't have a refugee crisis. We have a crisis of human rights. And so it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to our panel, which is really in the political way from all different kind of parties and all different kind of countries. So we have the MP Said Abdu from Sweden. He's from the center-right Liberal Party. Then we have on his right side, we have the Councilman Mambanzu Bamenga from Eindhoven, the City Council, Netherlands. And we have from Germany 2 MPs over here. One is from the Social Democratic Party, it's Karamba Diaby. And then we have the MP Azize Tank. She's also from Germany, from the left party, Die Linke MP. Yeah. So I would like to start with Mr. Said Abdu and give him the microphone or ask him to come over here for his speech. We will have a speech of each country, and then we have the chance to discuss together. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hi. And thank you for the presentation. Good. So I'll try to give you a brief context of the nation Sweden and the national state of Sweden and some context of it, and then hopefully we can discuss it further on what we're doing and so. All right. So I come from Sweden, a scarcely populated country in the outskirts of civilization. Just some 100 years ago, Sweden was a land that people fled from. And one of the countries that they flew to was actually the United States of America. We have quite a huge population in Minnesota. I don't know if you've heard it, but there's a lot of it. So many of the people who fled were actually fleeing from hunger and religious oppression from the Swedish Lutheran Church. During and after the Second World War in Sweden, Sweden changed to a country that people were fleeing to and not from. The recipe to handle the change was actually large unemployment subventions to those newly arrived and that did not find a job in their new country. This has created de facto second-class citizenship along ethnic lines in Sweden, and it's indeed dangerous for society in Sweden. We in the Liberal Party in Sweden see this as one of our most important challenges on the years that's coming. But we do have something that is called the social welfare state and the social security system that have 2 lock-up effects. It locks up those that are Swedish citizenship in subvention in our country, but the system also locks people out of the country. We Swedes, we love our national state and highly developed social security system that will make the Obamacare blush. I know you have a big discussion about that here, right? We got free health care, we got 5 weeks of paid leave, we got what you're having a discussion about right now, the maternity leave, right? So these are rich gifts that are instantly given to you the second you receive your citizenship in Sweden, either by chance of being born there or by applying to the citizenship. However, by creating our social democratic dream society, we have closed the door for families who are fleeing to change, who are trying to build a new life in Sweden. The price of the welfare state is paid by a long way to citizenship. If the dream does not end at the border control, because we are building huge borders in Sweden and all across Europe, actually. Me and my generation are the first generation to truly be global. Me, myself, my name is Said, as presented. I have a background in Ethiopia and Eritrea, born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and grew up in Sweden, and just turned 30, and have done my second year in the parliament. So it's truly a global world we're living in right now. We know no borders, we know no obstacles. We see what is great and reach for it by distances. We are adrift on a great sea of change with a clear view of land on the other side of the oceans. With that view, it's not strange to imagine why people risk their life for a better future somewhere else. Why people in the thousands are clinging to the smallest raft in the Mediterranean Sea for a chance to change their lives. We do not want to see children being denied entry at the border because of where their father are being born, whether it's from Syria or dark-skinned from Eritrea. The picture we see in the media right now is actually, we see the masses that are coming from Syria, but we do not see the colored people who are fleeing from Africa. We make a priority of having an inclusion policy in Sweden, of course. This is not primarily a question of race, but it's a question of a citizenship in the world where basic freedom of free movement of goods, people, and capital has been denied in the wake of the largest refugee crisis that we see. So this has an effect on the black community in Europe, and we are trying to tackle it together. And we are some of us here are actually very prominent on what we are doing. We're trying to build a movement, even though we don't have we're not that many Afro-Europeans in Europe, but we are trying to build a movement together. So I'll stop and end my commentary, right? Thank you.
So next I would like to ask Karamba to come to the microphone. Thank you. Or to sit there and... Ja, kannst du auch, klar.
Ja, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde, das Thema ist Lage der schwarzen Menschen in Deutschland und wie sieht es aus mit dem Begriff Rasse, mit dem Thema Rechte und politische Maßnahmen aus.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we are here to talk about the situation of black people in Germany. What are the circumstances? What is their status? How do we deal with issues such as race, rights, and political measures or public policy?
Auf diese Fragen können mir die Ministerien, aber auch die Behörden in Deutschland keine Antwort geben, keine fundierte Antwort dazu geben.
The German authorities, the ministries of state or other entities are not able to give me a well-founded answer to this question.
Als verantwortlicher Berichterstatter für das Thema im Menschenrechtsausschuss, in dem ich stellvertretender Vorsitzender bin, habe ich das Thema immer wieder auf die Agenda gesetzt. Aber wie schon erwähnt, die Situation sieht nicht so aus, dass man demnächst eine schnelle Antwort dazu hat.
And as the relator for the commission that deals with human rights in the federal parliament, I have put on our agenda this topic over and over again, but to this date, it doesn't seem that we have made great progress.
Denn schwarze Menschen sind noch nicht offiziell als Gruppe anerkannt, die besonders von Alltagsrassismus und strukturellem Rassismus in Deutschland betroffen ist.
Because black people so far have not been recognized as a group, as an entity that is particularly affected by racism, both also by structural racism and in everyday life.
Eine Folge davon ist, bisher existiert kaum wissenschaftliche Forschung zur Diskriminierung von schwarzen Menschen als Gruppe.
And one of the examples is that there are hardly any scientific data to determine what exactly the status and the situation is of black people in Germany as a group.
Insbesondere die Bereiche Arbeitsmarkt, die Bereiche Bildungswesen, Gesundheitswesen und Wohnungsmarkt möchte ich da erwähnen.
Particularly in the areas that have to do with the workplace, the job market, with education, healthcare, and housing.
Es gibt auch keine offiziell erhobene demografische Daten, zum Beispiel über die Anzahl der in Deutschland lebenden schwarzen Menschen. Gibt es keine offizielle Zahl.
For example, there are no demographic data either. There is no exact number of black people living in Germany.
Hinweise werden dann meistens auf den Begriff Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund. Also alle werden dann in einem zusammenfassenden Begriff gepackt, Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund. Und das gibt nicht wieder die Situation der schwarzen Menschen in Deutschland.
There is a generic term that is being used, which is mentioned as people with a migration or migratory background. And this includes everybody. Everybody is put under this general topic, and this does not take into account the specific and special situation in which, or that black people in Germany find themselves in.
Konsequenz ist, also das Problem dabei ist, dass der Begriff lässt sich nur auf Menschen mit eigener Migrationserfahrung, ich zum Beispiel, oder deren Kinder, zum Beispiel meine Kinder, das heißt Menschen, die nach 1949 in Deutschland eingewandert sind und deren Kinder zählen als Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund alle.
This means that the term to have a immigration background or migratory background has a certain or is used in a specific way. For example, it applies to people that immigrated themselves, like myself, for example, or my children, which means that all people that have migrated to Europe or that have come to Germany, after 1949 are basically people with a migratory background.
Die Kinder meiner Kinder werden zwar Schwarze sein, aber die zählen nicht mehr dazu.
However, my children's children will also be black, yet they will not be included under this topic of people with migratory background.
Also diese Eigenschaft wird aber in keine Statistik versucht, jetzt Rechnung zu tragen oder gelöst das Problem.
But there is no approach to register this information in any kind of statistic.
Hinzu kommt das deutsche Verständnis von Rassismus, setzt eine Intention heraus. Also in Deutschland wird das Wort Rassismus meistens vermieden. Es wird immer gesagt Ausländerfeindlichkeit oder Ausländerfeindlichkeit meistens oder Fremdenfeindlichkeit. Also ich bin keine Fremde in Deutschland, lebe seit 30 Jahren dort. Meine Kinder sind keine Fremde, die sind dort geboren. Aber wenn sie Opfer von Rassismus sind, dann spricht man von Fremdenfeindlichkeit. Und das ist ein falscher Begriff meiner Meinung nach.
In Germany, the term racism implies intention, intentional approach or thought. And it's a word that is very carefully avoided. So oftentimes, instead of using the word racism, it is mentioned that there's a hostility towards foreigners, there's xenophobia. The word racism is not used. Now, I am not a foreigner. I've lived in Germany for 30 years. My children are not foreigners. They were actually born in Germany. And so people that are faced with that situation are facing racism, yet it is a word that is not being used.
Also die konkrete Konsequenz davon ist natürlich dann, dass die Existenz eines institutionellen Rassismus wird somit abgelehnt.
And as a consequence, the existence of an institutionalized racism is completely rejected.
Dieses hat zur Folge, dass schwarze Menschen in Deutschland nur mangelhaft von Diskriminierung geschützt sind.
And this has led to a situation in which black people in Germany are protected against discrimination only to a very limited extent.
Deshalb mein zweiter Aspekt, die ich erwähnen möchte, wäre die Frage, was tut Deutschland im Hinblick auf Antidiskriminierung?
So the second item that I would like to talk about is what does Germany do in order to avoid discrimination or protect black people against discrimination?
Aufgrund des Druckes der Europäischen Union waren wir verpflichtet, bis 2006 ein eigenes Antidiskriminierungsgesetz zu verabschieden. Der Druck ist hoch, also sehr groß geworden. Irgendwann mussten wir so ein Gesetz machen. Dann haben wir ein Gesetz gemacht namens Allgemeine Gleichbehandlungsgesetz. Schwieriges Wort in Englisch, ne?
Nö, das Because of strong pressure exerted by the European Union, finally, in 2006, Germany was forced to pass a law against discrimination and to pass its own law on discrimination. And as I said, pressure was so big and so strong that finally Germany passed a law that has the name Equal Treatment.
Aber dieses Gesetz, die nach Kompromiss beschlossen wurde, ist allerdings nur im Verhältnis zwischen Privatpersonen anwendbar. Also das Thema institutionelle Diskriminierung ist dort nicht berücksichtigt. Deshalb wollte ich das betonen an der Stelle.
However, this law only applies to the relationship between private entities, between private people, I should say, between persons, not entities, between persons. And this means that it does not involve, it does not even touch upon the topic of institutional racism or discrimination.
Also offen gesagt, öffentlich-rechtliches Handeln staatlicher Institutionen, zum Beispiel im Bereich Bildung oder andere Bereiche, ist nicht von Diskriminierungsverbot in Deutschland betroffen.
In other words, talking very bluntly, the actions of public institutions in different areas, be it educations or others that apply to everybody, does not fall under the category or does not fall under the purview of this law for the equal treatment of everybody.
Diese Lücke zeigt sich auch beim Handeln der Polizei. So sind zum Beispiel schwarze Menschen besonders von sogenannten Racial Profiling meistens betroffen.
And in this loop, or in this gap that we find in the law, this includes also police authorities, police entities, and black people are particularly affected by different measures or activities carried out, amongst them racial profiling.
Ein Problem ist, dass im Diskriminierungsfall sind oft die Betroffenen nicht in der Lage, einen rassistischen Fall vor Gericht zu bringen. Da sind ja unterschiedliche Gründe, die dafür gelten.
And it means also that most of the times people that feel discriminated against have no resources and do not act upon to go and bring this case before a court claiming discrimination. And there are all sorts of reasons for this.
Über die Gründe können wir vielleicht in der Diskussion nochmal darauf eingehen, damit die Zeit nicht überschritten ist. Dabei dürfen diese Menschen nicht durch Verbände vertreten werden. Wir reden dort von Verbandklagerecht, die in Deutschland nicht möglich ist.
And we can talk about, during the discussion, maybe we can talk about these reasons why people will not go to the courts. And another issue that has to do with the court situation is that in Germany it is prohibited for people to be represented by different entities for such a case.
Ein Beleg dafür ist natürlich die niedrige Anzahl der Antidiskriminierungsklagen. Das sagt auch das Antidiskriminierungsstelle des Bundes, dass die Zahl sehr niedrig ist. Ein Grund dafür natürlich ist, dass wir kein Verbandklagerecht haben.
It is, I believe, comparable to the collective action situation in the United States, comment by the interpreter. And we can see also there's a very low number of cases brought before the courts for discrimination. Also the Federal Office for Anti-Discrimination Issues indicates that there's an extremely low number of cases. And the reason for that we can see clearly in the law.
Schwarze Menschen leben seit über 300 Jahren in Deutschland. Ihre Lebensleistungen müssen ausreichend gewürdigt werden.
Black people have been living in Germany for 300 years, and their contributions to society along their lives are something that needs to be recognized and valued accordingly and properly.
Und ihre besonderen Erfahrungen mit Rassismus müssen anerkannt werden. Trotz der schwierigen Lage meine ich, es gibt aber Hoffnungsschimmer.
And their very special situation, the special problems that they face as Black people with discrimination and other issues, is something that needs to be recognized even under these circumstances. And even though it is difficult, I believe there is some hope.
Ich freue mich sehr, dass schwarze Menschen in Deutschland in der Gesellschaft sichtbarer werden.
I am very glad that Black people are becoming more and more visible in German society.
Das liegt vor allem an dem selbstbewussten Auftreten von der schwarzen Community, insbesondere die Jüngeren davon.
This is due largely to the fact that people of the Black community act assertively and with confidence, and this is noticeable particularly amongst the younger generation.
Eine Person davon sitzt unter uns hier, Daniel. Ich darf auch Elisabeth Canessa nennen, als Fellow von UN-Dekade für Menschen mit afrikanischer Abstammung in Deutschland. Ich darf die Organisation ADAN, Afrodeutsche Akademiker-Netzwerk von jüngeren Menschen, und ich darf auch das Projekt EOTO nur als Beispiele von Organisationen und von Menschen, die jüngere Menschen vertreten, die sich wirklich sehr, sehr engagieren in Deutschland. Und das ist ein richtiges Zeichen dafür, dass wir optimistisch zu sein haben.
Sagt man Otto?
EOTO.
EOTO. Mhm. One representative of this young generation is amongst us here, Daniel, in the front row. And I can also mention Elizabeth Canessa, who's a fellow of the UN Decade for recognition of people that with of Black background. And then there's ADAN, ADAN, which is the Association for African German Academics. And then there's also EOTO, that is another organization that represents young people. And the fact that these entities exist gives me some hope for the future.
Es bildet sich auch Allianzen über Parteigrenzen hinweg. Dass ich heute gemeinsam mit meiner Kollegin Azize Tanker hier sitze, ist ein gutes Beispiel dafür.
And there are also coalitions and alliances created across party lines, and the fact that I'm here today with my good colleague Azize Tank, who sits to my right, is a good example for this.
Ich möchte mich am Ende ganz herzlich bedanken für die Einladung zu dieser Konferenz hier, dem PLC. Und so eine Konferenz haben wir in Deutschland noch nicht. Und ich würde mich freuen auf künftigen Austausch und würde mich sehr freuen, wenn wir auch Gastgeber so einer Konferenz in Europa, in Deutschland sein könnten. Ich möchte mich ganz herzlich bei Ihnen bedanken für die Aufmerksamkeit.
And finally, I would like to thank you for the invitation of being here and participating at the ALC. In Germany, we do not have this kind of events or conferences, not yet. I look forward to future exchanges with you, and possibly, hopefully, that in the future we can host such an event, such a conference in Europe, in Germany. And I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Karamba, and I would like now to pass the microphone to Mrs. Chan.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich möchte mich auch für die Einladung ganz herzlich bedanken und freue mich, dass ich heute hier bin.
Ladies and gentlemen, I also would like to thank you for this invitation. It is for me a great pleasure to be able to be here today.
Weil das Zeit zu kurz ist, ich möchte nicht die Sachen wieder wiederholen, weil Karamba gemacht hat. Ich würde ein paar anderen Punkten eingehen. Einmal ist es wie das im Bundestag aussieht, Migranten und People of Color und Flüchtlinge. Und wie können wir uns Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund und People of Color uns organisieren und wie das wieder unsere Rechte dann kommen, würde ich mal ein paar Sachen zu sagen.
Due to the short time at my disposal, I do not want to repeat things that Karamba has already mentioned. So I would like to approach a few other topics. For example, how in the German federal parliament, the Bundestag, how do we deal with the issue of people of color, with the issue of refugees? How can we organize and how can we finally claim rights and accomplish these rights? And this is something I would like to talk about briefly.
In meiner bisherigen Arbeit als Abgeordnete und zuvor als Migrantenbeauftragte von Charlottenburg-Wilmersdorf waren wichtige zwei Themen für mich. Einmal ist es persönliche politische Teilhabe und Durchsetzung sozialer Menschenrechte sehr zentral und habe ich mich vorher und jetzt auch dafür dann einsetze.
In my work that I have carried out so far as a member of parliament and before as a person in charge of migration for the section Charlottenburg-Wilmersdorf, part of Berlin, there are two topics that were always of central importance for me and to which I've dedicated myself both then and now, and these are to create stronger political participation and to implement social human rights.
Soziale Menschenrechte beziehen die Menschen als handelnde Akteure und individuelle Rechtsträger unserer Gesellschaft ein.
Social human rights include humans, people, as acting protagonists and as individual entities and legal figures in our society.
Um die Stimme der Migranten in der Gesellschaft hörbar und sichtbar zu machen, benötigen wir einen Strukturwandel, der den Erwerb von Kompetenzen und Befähigung zur Selbstorganisation ermöglicht.
In order to make the voice of migrants heard and make them visible in society, we require a structural change which will allow for the acquisition of competencies and to empower them for self-organization.
Über die Einwanderer wird gesprochen. Über sie wird bestimmt. Sie kommen aber jedoch nicht in ausreichendem Maße selbst zu Wort.
People talk about migrants, they talk about them, they make determinations and decisions about them, but migrants themselves hardly ever have a possibility to make themselves heard with their own voice.
Deshalb ist es an der Zeit, diesen Prozess vom Kopf auf die Füße zu stellen.
And that is why the moment has come to put this system upside down.
Ich bin selbst 1972 im Alter von 22 Jahren als sogenannte Gastarbeiterin nach Deutschland gekommen und habe zuerst in einer Porzellanfabrik in Bayern gearbeitet. Deutsch habe ich am Fließband gelernt.
I myself arrived in Germany in 1972 at the age of 22 as a so-called migrant worker, as they were called in Germany. And first I worked in a porcelain factory in the state of Bavaria. And I learned German at the assembly line.
Also von den Tellermacherin bin ich zum Bundestag gekommen.
From being a manufacturer, a producer of plates, I made it to become a member of parliament.
Ich weiß deshalb auch, was es heißt, als Migrantin für eine gleichberechtigte Teilhabe zu kämpfen.
That is, I know exactly what it means to be a migrant fighting for equal participation.
Im Bundestag sitzen heute mehr Abgeordnete mit Migrationshintergrund als je zuvor. Die Zahl ist im Vergleich zu 2009 von 21 auf 37 Abgeordnete gestiegen.
In the German Bundestag, the German federal parliament, today we have more Congress people, more members of parliament with migratory origins than ever before. From 2009 to this date, the number of them has increased from 21 to 37.
Aber großteils handelte es sich dabei allerdings einen europäischen Hintergrund.
However, it has to be mentioned that even if we talk about people with a migratory background, most of them come from the European foreign countries.
Abgeordnete mit Migrationshintergrund machen damit 5,9% von den insgesamt 631 Abgeordnete aus.
Members of parliament that have migratory background make up 5.9% of a total of 631.
Das ungleiche Verhältnis wird darin sichtbar, dass Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund einen Anteil von 20% der Gesamtbevölkerung in Deutschland ausmachen.
However, the number of people that have migratory background in society at large is 20% of total population. So the representation in the federal parliament is very unequal, as is clearly reflected by these numbers.
Deswegen, wir müssen langfristig daran arbeiten, etwas Ähnliches wie den Congressional Black Caucus in Deutschland zu bilden.
Therefore, we need to make an effort and take steps so that long-term we can create in Germany something comparable to the Congressional Black Caucus.
Damit wäre der Weg der Mitgestaltung für Minderheiten eröffnet, um politische und gesellschaftliche Teilhabe praktisch werden zu lassen.
This would open a path, would open the possibility for minorities to participate in politics and to be heard and seen in practical terms in society and in politics.
Ich werde oft gefragt, ob ich zurück in die Heimat fliege, wenn ich verreise.
Entschuldigung, nee, mach weiter.
Ganz zu schweigen von der Frage, warum ich keine Kopftuch trage.
Very often, when I go on a trip, people ask me if I'm flying home, quote unquote, and let's not even mention the question of why I do not wear a headscarf.
Muss ich ein Kopftuch tragen, weil ich aus der Türkei komme und Muslimin sein müsste oder könnte?
Do I have to wear a headscarf simply because I come from Turkey or because I could be Muslim?
Vielleicht bin ich aufgrund meiner persönlichen Betroffenheit sensibler für Formen rassistischer Diskriminierungen.
Maybe due to my own personal experiences, I am more sensitized towards different forms of racial discrimination.
Schweige davon, dass ich sehr oft E-Mails und Briefe, Drohbriefe, Beleidigungen bekomme. Das erzähle ich jetzt noch nicht mal hier.
And I don't even want to mention or delve into the issue that I very often receive letters, emails that are either hate mail or threats.
Zum Beispiel, die sagen, Ausländer haben im Bundestag nicht zu suchen. Das ist das nur für die Deutschen.
For example, I get messages such as, foreigners have no place in federal parliament, the German Bundestag is only for Germans.
Doch mittlerweile kann wohl niemand in Deutschland mehr die Augen verschließen vor der rassistischen Gefahr.
However, I believe that at this point, nobody can claim that there is no racist danger in Germany. Nobody can close their eyes to this fact.
Täglich finden Übergriffe oder Anschläge auf Flüchtlingsunterkünfte statt. Im Jahr 2015 wurden mehr als 1000 solche Anschläge gezählt. Dazu kommen unzählige rassistisch motivierte Gewalttaten gegen Muslime, gegen Juden, Sinti und Roma und People of Color. Das geschieht im Osten und Westen, in der Bundesrepublik meine ich, auf dem Land, aber auch in Großstädten.
Every day, there is some sort of attack or hostile act against housing for refugees. In the year 2015 alone, there were over 1,000 of these attacks or actions. And additionally, there are countless racially, or rather racistically, motivated acts of violence against Muslims, Jews, Sinti and Roma, and people of color. These acts take place in the East, in the West, that is the entire territory of the German country, of the Federal Republic of Germany, in the entire country, in rural areas, but also in big cities.
Man kann sagen, rassistische Gewalt und rechte Terror gehören heute fest zum bundesdeutschen Alltag.
One could say that racism or violence triggered by racism and right-wing terror are today a part of everyday life in Germany.
Betroffen sind wir alle, denn es ist nicht nur eine Frage der Solidarität mit Minderheiten in unserer Gesellschaft, es ist eine Frage unserer Demokratie und ihres Überlebens.
And we are all affected by this because it's not only a matter of showing or feeling solidarity with minorities in our society, it is a question that affects our democracy and the survival of our democracy.
Der Rassismus in der deutschen Politik zeigt sich auch an der Hetze gegen Geflüchtete aus Kreisen der etablierten Parteien oder an den aktuellen Verschärfungen des Asylrechts.
This racism in German politics can also be seen in the hate speech or against the hostility shown in talks against refugees that come sometimes from the established parties, or also the fact that the right to asylum has been restricted.
Deutschland ist in den letzten Jahren übrigens wiederholt von Gremien der UN und der EU kritisiert worden, weil es den Rassismus nicht konsequent bekämpft haben.
In Germany, over the last few years, or rather Germany in the last few years has been criticized by entities of the United Nations and the European Union because they say that racism is not fought consequently enough.
Liebe Freunde, wir brauchen perspektivisch eine starke Selbstorganisation von Minderheiten in allen gesellschaftlichen Bereichen.
Dear friends, we really need a perspective of a strong self-organization of minorities in all social aspects.
Dazu gehört auch eine professionelle Sichtbarmachung in der Öffentlichkeit.
And this includes to make them visible in public life.
Warum gründen wir nicht eigene Medien?
And to do this by organizing professionally. Why do we not create, for example, our own media?
Warum bilden wir nicht fachübergreifende migrantische Kompetenzteams, die Migrantinnen und Migranten qualifizieren?
Why, for example, do we not create multidisciplinary competencies teams for migrants that would qualify and certify migrants?
Multikulturalität passiert und sie ist förderlich für den politischen und demokratischen Diskurs. Diese Vielfalt muss auch strukturell im Bundestag und in der Gesellschaft repräsentiert werden.
There is multiculturalism. Multiculturalism happens, and it is good for political and democratic discourse. And this variety, this multiculturalism needs to be structurally represented in the federal parliament and also in society.
Ich danke für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit und allerletzt möchte ich mal sagen, lassen Sie uns mal gemeinsam vernetzen. Es ist von den mehr Kraft kommt von den mehr Vernetzungen und damit schließe ich und ich nehme von diesem Kongress auch sehr vieles für Deutschland, was wir das machen könnten, so ähnliches Projekte und Aktivitäten. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to say that I would like to appeal to you. I would like to ask you that we should have more exchange, we should have more networking because networking creates stronger power, stronger influence. And I would like to tell you also that this Congress has taught me many things that I will take home for all sorts of projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Tank. I'm happy now to
Vielen Dank, Frau Tang.
give the word to Mr. Bamenga.
Jetzt hat das Wort Herr.
And he doesn't have a name tag because he literally decided to jump on a plane last week so that he could join us.
Wir haben kein Namensschild für ihn, weil er
Well, I heard the subject, so I couldn't stand to not come. Well, let me start with this. I will tell you something about myself, and then I'll tell you something about the situation in the Netherlands, and then I'll end up by giving some solutions which I provided in the Netherlands in the case of discrimination, racism. Well, first of all, my name is Panzu Bamenga. My father and my mother gave me this name, and Panzu actually means something like fighter. Bamenga means something like of a tribe, but I always say fighter of the people. So, just to keep it simple. And my mother and my father gave me this name as if they knew that my life's going to be a fight. Not only of myself, but also of the people. So, first of all, I came to Europe. So I was born in the Congo, Zaire, and I came to Europe as a refugee. My mother and my brother and my sister, three of us, we came to Europe. And then in Europe, we were first in France, and then we went to Belgium, and then we went to the Netherlands. And actually, we didn't get a status directly. It took us like 16 years before we get a status. And in these 16 years, I couldn't just stand still and do nothing. When I was smaller, when I was like 11 or 12, I started comparing my situation to the situation of other people. And I saw the injustice with my family. If I compare it to the injustice to others who have, for instance, new clothes, who has, for instance, money. We had like one bed where we were sleeping with three of us. Sometimes people ask me, why you don't sleep on your back, on the front? Well, I sleep, in the side because I'm so used to sleeping in one bed with the three of us. So we were raised poorly in that situation. And I saw the difference. I saw the injustice in the society. And as a young kid, I started dreaming about a different kind of world, a world which is more just, a world where there is more equal opportunity for all. And I said that I will try to do my best. I will try to do my best to really achieve that kind of world, because I believe that every individual in the world can really make a difference. So as a 12 years old, I started working on it, even though we didn't have any paper, because I had problems with studying. I had problems with working. We didn't get any, subsidies for my education or anything else. But I started working. I was a dishwasher, to pay my studies, and later on I started making music, well known as hip-hop. So I started making music to also get some money so that I can do to pay my study. And I knew that it was going to be very important to me to know about law, because law is something which was affecting my situation. So I was studying law. And I also knew that I could change my personal situation or the situation of individuals in a city, in a town, or in society. But it could be more effective as well to change the situation of a greater amount of people. So I started to educate myself as well in politics and how to represent the people. So by doing that, after 16 years, I managed to file an own procedure for my family. So, what lawyers couldn't do. Because in 2006, they told me that, listen, you have to take the airplane right now because you have nothing to contribute in this country, and you have to leave this country right now. If you don't leave, we will force you out. We will force you out of this country. You have nothing to contribute. And we had like 8 weeks before that airplane took us back to the Congo. And at that point, we were 16 years in Europe. And in these 8 weeks, I started to studying more and more about immigration law. And at the end, I filed a procedure, and that procedure was successfully. I get a phone call. I got a phone call from the minister, not from the minister directly, but from one of his workers, saying that the minister has read your letter and it's going to be okay. And from that point, I thought that the sky is no longer the limit. The sky is no longer the limit because everything is possible. I started working harder and harder to achieve that goal, to achieve that dream. And when I started working harder, I saw that there were things happening in society that really needed my attention. And I knew that I was young because right now I'm 31. But I said that it's not always about experience. Sometimes it's more about a vision, having a vision and knowing what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. And also finding the right people to collaborate and to do it. So I started working on it, and I started working from my values because I knew that my values, the most important values for me was the equal opportunity, bringing equal opportunity for everybody else. So I finished my study, law, and I did some internship at the parliament and also did some internship at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I started working and then started getting into politics. Since 2 years ago, I started into politics. I was member of council 2 years ago. And from that point, a lot of things changed for me. Because people told me that it's not possible to make a coalition of not only people on the left side, like the socialists, but also people from the right side, the populists. And I thought that that could be a challenge. So what I tried to do is bring those two people together. And how I tried to do that is simply by bringing out my message. My message was about responsibility. Responsibility about what is happening at that moment in our society. And the issue at that moment was the migrants who are coming to our cities. And we believe that we should take that responsibility for those migrants. But on the right side, you had people saying that, but we have issues as well. And these migrants are only going to, they're only going to make our issues even bigger. So what I did is saying that we need to take our responsibility, but we need also to address the issues of those people who are saying it. Because they are not saying that they don't want the migrants, they are just saying we have issues as well. So by combining those two, I managed to have a coalition of left and right. And that was something very special, and that didn't really happen a lot in the Netherlands. And from that point on, I went on coming with another initiative, the initiative about discrimination. This was a very important initiative because every time I was in a car and there was a police controlling people, I was being stopped. I didn't get it. Why am I being stopped? And so I was living that. I was living that in our society. And when I was speaking Dutch, people were like, wow, you speak better Dutch than we do. So how is that? And I would tell them, yes, I know why you stopped me. And I can manage, but there is a lot of people who cannot manage in our society. And it's not only about racial profile, but it's also about labor discrimination. A lot of people cannot get that chance to work. You know, it's the funny thing is, it's really on the papers. Like, we have like this fast runner. You know, he just ran in the Olympics against Usain Bolt. He didn't win, of course. Who's going to win against Usain Bolt is almost not possible. But he ran, I think it was 5th. And actually, when he win, they call him, oh, this Dutch guy won because he's dark skinned. This Dutch guy won. When he loses a game, they say, well, this guy from Curacao lost. You know, so it's very strange. And this is happening in our society. So because of all of this, we need to come with two things at least. We need to change our legislation. So what I try to do is come up with an initiative to fight against discrimination. And just to be a little bit more specific, I worked with Anthony Clements, one of the people I met in the Transatlantic Inclusion Leaders Network. I worked with her on an initiative to fight against labor market discrimination. And one of the, it was like a big initiative, but one of the things which we did is anonymous soliciting. Yeah, so it means that nobody knows actually who you are when you are applying for a job. And when you are doing that, when you apply for a job and they see the person like, oh, I didn't know you were dark-skinned, then they have to deal with it at that moment. So this is one of the things which I did in collaboration with Anthony Clements. And the other thing is, just to wrap it up, the other thing is to build a movement. The Dutch Inclusion Leaders Network. And this movement is not saying that I'm from the Democrat 66 party, so I will not work with other parties. No, it's to bring people together who wants to fight for inclusion. To bring people together from all different kind of parties. So it's like an inter-party coalition, which we are trying to build in the Netherlands so we can fight those issues which we think are important. To look beyond borders. And I believe that looking behind borders is something that we should do not only in the Netherlands, not only in Europe, but globally as well. Like the MP of Germany already said, we should collaborate far more. Because I believe this is how we can reach a synergy together. Like I collaborated with Anthony Clements. So I would like to know from you, when I'm finishing, I would like to know from you if you are ready to make a difference as well. And I mean make a difference by collaboration between Europe, between the United States, and between all of us globally. So please tell me, are you with me? Are you with me? Okay, thank you very much.
lady on the left side. Yeah. I mean, from over here it's left, so right side.
Well, hello. Thank you all for your contributions. This topic is very personal to me because I'm Afro-European American. That's what I call myself. Yeah, so parents are from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was born in Aachen, Germany, grew up in Luxembourg, and now I'm living in the United States and a U.S. citizen. So, yeah, so welcome. And I'm also now an attorney, and I work at the Department of Homeland Security. And my father came to Germany as a student in 1974 from then Zaire, and he has a PhD and got a job with General Motors in Luxembourg. So that's what brought us to the US. And speaking about that, a lot of you mentioned discrimination. When my father was done with his PhD, he could only find work with an American company. And now when he advises my younger cousins who still live in Europe, many of them France and Belgium, he advises them work for an American company because that's how he was able to advance in his career. Have any of you all tried to work with the private sector employers to deal with this topic of discrimination, especially with those people of color that are now getting advanced degrees and making sure that they can advance throughout their careers? Because a lot of my relatives now live in Canada because they haven't found jobs in Europe. So I was wondering if y'all could talk about that. Thank you.
If there's one more question, I would like to take this and then go back to the panel because we're kind of over the time.
Apropos to the gentleman from Sweden's comment, the Syrian refugee crisis is having an irrefutable impact on the various communities of people of African descent. So I would like for any member of the panel to provide the audience with some concrete and specific examples of the impact of the refugee crisis of asylum seekers from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and various other countries on the various Afro-European communities in your respective countries. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to ask you, please, to answer in a really short way. And I would say we start, from the left side. I think left is a nice thing.
I think I salute you. That's a very good idea. We have to be, I don't think this, it works. I think we have to be more of opinion makers on this description, on this narrative that you're actually addressing. We have to share the positive. I think we had a discussion the other day about innovations from Afro-Americans, how much they have contributed to the wealth of this country. And we have to do the same lesson also in Europe and throughout the atmosphere, actually. So I totally agree with you. We have to start, and I'll join your efforts, of course, definitely. The second question was regarding, the discrimination on labor market. I agree with you. We have a discrimination in the labor market. We can address it in many ways. One of the things that I did before becoming a politician was actually having dealt with the discrimination myself. I started a private recruitment company to address this specific topic, actually, because I felt there is a discrimination within the labor market, and we are talented. And I said, all right, how can I tackle this? Because I tried to address it through policymakers and try to advocate against it. And I said, all right, how can we do something? Is there any other ways of trying to address this? Because I know there is a value there. We are competent. We can contribute. They just have to see it. So I started a recruitment company, and actually the recruitment company is still nurturing and doing well today. And that was one way of addressing it, of course. But there is a discrimination, of course, but as Mumpanso had some suggestions about how to address it, I have a private approach to it as well through the recruitment company. And just a small comment about the Syrian migration, how it has more concretely affected the priorities of our migration policy in Sweden. I know it has in Germany as well. I think there was a notion that the migrants from Syria had a fast lane, a fast track actually to get their papers. And that of course has an effect on the other migrants who comes from other countries, and especially those who cross the Mediterranean. And that is something that isn't discussed at all, but that is one concrete way of how it has affected the migration policy of Sweden, of course. The fast lane for the Syrian refugees.
Thank you. Again, please, in a short way, yeah? So
I'll try to do it in a very short way.
I know it's hard.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm definitely think that it's right. You know, of course, you can talk about challenges, but let's talk about the achievement as well. I would try to answer that question together with the question about the impact what refugees are having in our society, and say something about the private sector, how we can work together. So, one of the things I did in Eindhoven, is basically to make the people proud. Because sometimes people, they don't feel proud. They don't see what actually the difference that they are doing. So when there was an issue about asylum seekers, refugee reception center coming to our city, like 700 people, refugees coming to our city, a lot of people opposed it. But what I said in the council actually was, I reminded them, like when I was a small kid, like 8 years old, it was the Dutch people, the volunteers, who teach me how to speak Dutch, who teach me how to sport, teach me how to play basketball, to box, and all of these things. And I told them that was the best period of my life, actually, being in that reception center. And the thing which the Dutch people did to me was to give me back my dignity. To give me back my dignity. And by saying that, I gave those people in the council, but also people outside of the council, a feeling of proudness, and saying that, wow, and we can do this now for the people who are coming now from Syria, from all these different countries. So, and this was one of the reasons how everybody voted, yeah, why not? But that's true, Sometimes people aim to forget it. And I'll close up by saying that for private sectors, numbers are important. If you can just say that diversity is quality, if you can put that in the mind of the private sectors, and as a government, you should show the example, not only preach about it, but apply it as well, then I believe that private sector definitely will understand it, and they will work together with you.
Thank you so much. And no, Mr. Oh.
Yeah, just a few words, quickly. As a person with political commitments, I'd just like to tell you that we, globally, we tried everything already. The question is, why didn't we succeed during a long time, and we think we don't reverse? That's the question. I do believe that we have to work on a psychological field and material field. And now we live at an area where we can connect, exchange, and fight together. But I think that what is the source of the issue? It's representation, prejudices. So it's very important for me. That's why I started with my political commitment. It's very important for me to work on education. What we show on history, geography, society, and individual who invented, who created, who made so wonderful things. It's always very amazing for me to hear black people speaking German, Dutch. Yes, you can find people like us everywhere on the earth, speaking all kind of languages, able to sing all kind of music. We know how to do everything, every kind of thing. We just have to fight in order to show it, and we'll get respect, and it's the beginning of all. That's what I do.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Diaby and Mr. Stank, really, really short because our other panel is waiting. I mean, we were late anyway when we came up here,
Ja,
so
also
we took our time.
ich mache
really
ich mache das ganz kurz. Das Thema Diskriminierung auf Arbeitsmarkt, Sie haben das richtig beschrieben. Ich hätte Sie gerne in Deutschland als Rechtsanwältin und nicht in den USA. Leider haben Sie uns verlassen. Aber das Thema ist natürlich, das beschäftigt uns sehr, sehr. Insgesamt in Deutschland muss man sagen, dass die Teilhabe, ich meine im Bereich Arbeitsmarkt, im Bereich öffentlicher Dienst, im Bereich Politik, ist das sehr gering. In öffentlicher Dienst reden wir von 8% der Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund, die dort sind. Wir reden in dem Kommunalbereich, in der Politik 2,4%. Meine Kollegin hat schon gesagt, im Deutschen Bundestag 5,9% von Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund. Das ist natürlich sehr, sehr gering. Wir versuchen wirklich, das zum Thema zu machen. Nur ein Beispiel, wir haben anonyme Bewerbungen zum Beispiel eingeführt gehabt als Modellprojekt. Jetzt wünschen wir uns, dass das ausgedehnt wird. Weil die Zeit kurz ist, kann ich nicht mehr sagen. Ich wollte nur bestätigen, dass das wirklich ein Problem ist, womit wir wirklich zu tun haben. Wenn ich in Amerika komme, bin ich immer sofort überrascht, wenn ich am Flughafen Menschen sehe mit Turban, mit Kopftuch und so weiter und so fort und schwarz, und alle Menschen dieser Welt sind am Flughafen als Zollbeamte. In Deutschland wäre das immer noch ein Traum, einen schwarzen Polizist oder Zollbeamte zu sehen. Ja? Also das ist nur ein Beispiel.
I'm going to speak briefly about discrimination in the job market. It's definitely true what you just said. And I would love to have you as an attorney, a labor attorney in Germany, but unfortunately you have left us. And to talk about the participation in society in Germany, that has been an issue in general. I would talk about people of color or black people representing maybe 8% participation in general. We talked about that at the municipal level or county level, it is only about 2.4% political participation in the federal parliament. Was already mentioned by my colleague, 5.9%, which is still very, very low. We had introduced the blind applications as a project, but we would like to make this more extensive because we consider it to be very important. And to come to an end regarding that, I just want to say that job discrimination or discrimination at the job workplace is a big issue. I agree with you, and we have to do more things about it. And I would like to say that I'm always extremely surprised and exalted almost when I come to the United States and I see people with turbans or headscarves that are at passport control or customs. And this is only a dream that we could have in Germany, to have a black police officer or to have a black agent in customs. Thank you very much.
Ich fange auch mit dem Arbeitsmarkt. Ich habe dir bei meinem Rede erzählt, dass ich Migrantenbeauftragte war in einem Bezirk. 5000 Angestellte im öffentlichen Dienst. Ich war die Einzige mit Migrationshintergrund in der Führungspositionen und insgesamt, wenn man die anderen Bereiche nimmt, nicht mal 5 Finger voll wird. Es ist das beliebteste Wort in Deutschland, heißt das Integration. Aber weiß man nicht, was sie das mit dem Integration eigentlich meinen. Und ich sage es ganz offen, ich bin eine Integrationsverweigerin. Ich will nicht integriert werden. Ich möchte so akzeptiert werden, wie ich bin. Und ich finde es ist schön, dass wir diese unterschiedlich sind. Und das ist das auch, macht das eine Land reicher und bereichert auch die Kultur. Der andere ist dann, Europa mit dem Geflüchteten muss ihre Mauer dann öffnen. Diese Menschen wollen nicht von unserer Almosen, sondern die wollen, was wir denen dann weggenommen haben, wieder haben und die haben Recht darauf. Das müssen wir denen dann wieder zurückgeben. Wir haben den ausgebeutet, Europa und USA zusammen. Gut, sie sagte, es ist schon reicht. Bringt sie mich dann aus dem Konzept. Also gut, aber es ist, ich mache zum Beispiel auch ganz bewusst, dass ich in den Bundestag reinkam, meine Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter habe ich mit Migrationshintergrund ausgesucht, weil auch da ist es sehr, sehr wenige Menschen in dem Bundestag mit Migrationshintergrund beschäftigt. Wenn wir das nicht machen, können wir von den weißen Deutschen nicht erwarten, dass sie das für uns machen. Endlich ist es die Zeit, dass wir unsere eigenen Lieder singen und nicht mehr die Lieder hören. Ja. Herzlichen Dank. Und ich freue mich. Übersetzen.
Wir sind nicht in Deutschland.
I'm going to speak very briefly about the job market. As I said, I was a migrant myself, and I worked in a company, and there were 5,000 people, public servants, in an entity, and I was the only one in a leading position that had migratory background. And in the other positions, you could count them all on one hand. The key word in Germany very often is the word integration. Although it's not exactly explained what that means or what is to be accomplished by that, but I want to say that I refuse to be integrated. I don't want to be integrated. I want to be accepted the way I am. I think it is beautiful that we're all different and diverse. That makes a culture and that makes a country and the world richer. And as to the refugees, Europe needs to open its walls and let enter the refugees. And it's not that refugees want to get donation from us as if they were begging for it. They are trying to recover something that they lost because of the exploitation that they were victim of for such a long time. And I want to also talk that about in the federal parliament. When I became a member, I tried particularly to hire people with migration or migratory background, because if we don't do it ourselves, if we don't give the example, we cannot expect that from white Germans. So it is time for us to sing our own songs and not to just listen to them. Thank you.
Okay. So as we are switching panels, I will just point out, so we're actually going to have this panel sit in the audience now, and we will have our other panel come up. We're going to actually have 4 chairs in the front for our next panel, so we just need 2 minutes to set that up. And as we're doing that, I'm just going to, you all can move, you can move. Apologies, as we're setting up the second panel. Oh, it's going to take 2 seconds. We have it arranged. It'll take all of 2 seconds. So, as we are just moving the chairs for the second panel, one of the things I did want to highlight is that MP Saeed Abdul, Daniel Guillermo, who's here. I'm going to say MP Mpanzu Bamenga, because we're going to speak this into action already. He's councilman now, but he has just been announced that he is going to be running for parliament, so he's going to be the answer to Geert Wilders, for those of you who are following politics in the Netherlands. And I'm missing one other person. But these are all part of the Transatlantic Inclusion Leaders Network, Ajane Clemens as well. So it's the next generation of young leaders. It's a program that Representative Hastings has worked to establish with the State Department and the German Marshall Fund to every year have 25 leaders participate in a retreat to focus on leadership for the next generation and for diverse communities on both sides of the Atlantic. So with that, we welcome our next panel, which will focus on the very easy issue of Brexit. 4. Sorry. It'll be okay. We'll just leave it like this. We'll leave it like this. It's fine. No, just sit. It's fine. Just sit here, please. We apologize. So, sorry. Yes. So.
Those on the side, come and join us in the center. We want it to be cozy.
Exactly. So.
Thank you very much.
And the one thing I'll say is for those of you that have been to CBCF for a few years, you know we always start late. We actually started on time, but we're going to end late. So we will continue with that tradition. No, we'll be fine.
So let's begin. Please get comfortable. This session should have lasted for about an hour, but we have 20 minutes. I always often say to elected politicians, and actually to anyone that will listen, in my view, are also being played out here in the USA. I'm going to just carry on for one more minute, would be my very quick scenario on what occurred in the UK around Brexit. Many of the politicians said that we are being run by foreigners. Our country is being run by foreigners, they said to the populace. They also said we are being occupied by foreigners. We're being run by foreigners, we're being occupied by foreigners. And you know what we want was the rhetoric? We want our country back. We want our country back. This language, I would argue, put our nation on a war footing. It's the language, it's the rhetoric of war. We want our country back. And in that rhetoric, who was the enemy? Who was those occupying? Who was those who are running our country? So these are the questions. These are the questions I'm going to put to this panel. But I also want them to think about how it translates to your ongoing debate, which is critical, which is jaw-dropping. So I'm going to start off to my left with an eminent politician. She used to be a former equality minister, sports minister. She's brilliant. She's just given a fantastic speech in Howard. Helen Grant, give her a round of applause, please.
For 5 minutes on this.
Just stand up and sit down.
I'll sit. I'm used to standing up as a politician. Is this one on?
Yes. You've got 3 minutes, Helen.
3 minutes? Oh, you must be joking. All right, well, let's see what we can do. Okay, on the 23rd of June, I mean, first of all, I agree with everything Simon said. We've both lived through the campaign, and it was very strange. On the 23rd of June, which was referendum night, country went to the vote, stayed up watching it with my son and my husband, and by the time we got to about 4 o'clock, we knew, having seen the results coming in, that we would be leaving the EU. We went to bed, following morning, woke up, saw David Cameron standing outside number 10 Downing Street. He looked as if he was about to burst into tears. He looked terrible, and basically he was announcing his resignation. Very, very strange. I felt a bit empty, shocked, and also that feeling that you get when you know you've lost something. The campaign had been an absolute disgrace. It was the worst I have ever seen, both in my political career and as a lawyer for 23 years. Instead of focusing on jobs and skills and growth and trade deals, which it should have, it focused completely on the very emotive subject of immigration. And there were messages, as Simon said, put out on a daily basis by lead campaigners, messages actually of hate and division, saying things like, you know, we're claiming back our country, we're taking back control, and of course, Independence Day. Temperatures were fanned up even more by the media. They seem to even enjoy it, not all, but some of them. And they fanned it up by, in many ways, in my opinion, excusing the inexcusable. People would say terrible things, and then they would turn around when crossed or cross-examined and say, well, he's just telling the truth, or he's just saying what other people think. And I'm afraid to say I've heard about that sort of thing happening here in the run-up to a very important election that you've got. The campaign came to a terrible head for me with the shooting and stabbing of a very young special female MP called Jo Cox. I'd been with her just 2 or 3 days before, a tiny little girl, her whole life ahead of her, rising star in the Labour Party, mother, baby, and a little boy. And it was politically motivated, and she was dead, and it was gone. And for a moment, that's the first time there'd been a murder in well, I think maybe the first time ever of a murder, but Parliament stopped and things slowed down, but then it started up again, and it was even worse than it was before. Nigel Farage added to it this awful poster where it was called Breaking Point. He put that out, and we saw lots of needy Syrian refugees tacking towards Britain, and he intended it to portray immigrants as parasites who would take from our country rather than giving. 1 minute, yeah, I'm there, Si. Anyway, just to close, since the referendum, not surprisingly, there's been a massive increase in hate crime. 85% of that is race-related. And I'm sorry to tell you that probably in the last 5, 6, 7 weeks, I have heard and seen more reports of the use of the N-word in my country than I have in the last 25 years. So it's not good, and it's almost as if the bigotry, the hostility, the racism, the discrimination has in some ways been legitimised by the referendum, the rhetoric and the result, and we have to do something about it. Thank you.
Made history in UK becoming the first Conservative female MP of African descent to sit on Her Majesty's bench of the next young man next to me also broke history. There's only one mayor, directly elected mayor in Europe of Caribbean descent, and is sitting next to me. He won't like me saying this. He gets a bit embarrassed about the history making. But all three of us here, we are descendants of African slaves. I mean, they don't mind me saying that. That's the truth, and we're proud. We're proud of that fact. We're descendants of African slaves. And a key city in the industry of slavery was Bristol City. Bristol City made its name, it made its fortune. It has these wonderful buildings built on the blacks of our ancestors. Fast forward 500 years, and this man is in charge of that city.
Marvin Reed. Thank you, Simon. I mean, the many issues we could pick up on Brexit. I also shared, I expected the Friday morning after the referendum to be an anticlimax, and it wasn't. And I think a number of people were shocked that actually the vote mattered as the pound began to plummet, and we'll wait to see what the full economic consequences are. But we do know in my city there are very real consequences, both financial and social. We've seen a rise in hate crimes. Those are to Eastern Europeans as well, but obviously to people of colour. Let me just get a few key points. First of all, I think there were 3, and there could be more, but my sense is I home in on 3 reasons why Brexit, what the leaders of the Brexit campaign were playing with. One is around context, and it's a narrative that politics is rubbish. And it says to me we need to be very careful the way we talk about politics, actually, because there are many rubbish aspects to it, but it's not all rubbish. And this idea of people from the establishment in search of attacking the establishment. Billionaires claiming to be outsiders. It's people who've had a life of privilege looking for a reason to justify their position of privilege, and then succouring and then succouring those of us who have lived on the margins by saying, we now speak for you. They played it with McCain and Obama. Trump is playing it now. Farage and crew played it in the UK. So there has to be something very careful. One of the point I'm making is they talk about the political elite. My argument, and journalists do this all the time, MAR, Today program, there is no political elite. There are just elites dominating politics. When I got elected, I did not become a member of the British elite. Secondly is that people are saying they can't get an appointment. They're doctors. And that's about, I think, is about the undermining of public services. It's not that immigrants are coming in and consuming all our public services. Many of them staff our public services. But we haven't taken care of our services. And me as a mayor of my city facing 29 million in cuts this year, 60 million in cuts between 17 and 20, we look at what we provide for our city, we cannot do it. It is not possible. So one is about defending the role of public institutions as well and the role they play in the public, because what will happen is people will blame other people rather than policy for the reason they can't get access to decent services. The second was that people saying you can't get paid. Polish plumbers and migrants undercutting the labour market and taking jobs off local people. Well, that's a function of the way the global economy is working right now. The trend has been, we'll get growth, but it will compound inequality, increase unaffordability, and you'll be left behind. The problem is those who have benefited from being on the top, that 1% that benefited from the top of globalization, are saying, don't look at us, look at them. So poor people, rather than looking up, they're looking sideways at the reasons to why their lives aren't working out for them. Let me just say, how long have I got? 1 minute. Overflow into the US. A few weeks ago, Nigel Farage from UKIP, one of the leaders of the Brexit campaign, shared a stage with Donald Trump. So it's important for me to say that one of the phrases Farage used was, I'm over here from the UK. I don't want anyone to be under any misunderstanding here. He did not represent the UK when he came here. He did not represent the UK when he said he didn't say vote for the guy, when he dissed Obama for coming over and warning us about the vote, and he did not represent the full UK when he said he wouldn't vote for Clinton as against Trump and endorse Trump. That's not what's going on. What you had was two privileged men who lived lives of Riley coming over and playing a game, and again, they're in search of a cause. They talk about anti-establishment, they talk about taking on the order, they do not tell you what the end game is. They have no track record of talking about equality and inclusion. They've no track record of talking about social justice. But it's an opportune time for them to play their, to dance in the sunlight, as it were.
Our organisation, along with Misha Thompson, is very much into succession planning, handing over the baton to the next generation of dynamic young men and women. And about 6 months ago, I went to the European Union for a meeting with an MEP. And there was this young man who walked around the corridors of power with a sense of, this belongs to me too. And I have something to offer. He was working with his MEP. And I looked at this young man and I felt so proud, not least because when you walk into the European Union, unless you're in the kitchen or unless you see the security guards, it is spot the black person. And this man with his bag and with his MEPs was just looking full of confidence. And so I'm pleased to have him as part of our broader family for race equality. Alpha is by a round of applause.
I don't know what to say after the introduction. I can't say I don't have any records yet, but hopefully soon, I guess. I want to give you the perspective of Brexit on Brussels and the EU, because we're so focused on the impact of Brexit in the UK. We're talking about rising xenophobia, racism in the UK, but I don't think we've spoken about what's happened and its implications in Europe. But before I say that, I want to show some kind of irony in the media and, some like how the media and politicians are sometimes hypocrites. After Brexit happened, the group that you see mentioned in the press a lot is the Poles. The Polish people who are being attacked on a regular basis, and which rightly so they should point out. But if that was a black person or a brown person, as it's been happening over and over again, no one would say anything. It's ironic that the Polish foreign minister, who comes from a very conservative, racist party, is now talking about racism and xenophobia in the UK, when that foreign minister doesn't even acknowledge the fact that people of color live in Poland. So that's why we have to look at the irony there, what's happening. And now about how Brexit impacts Europe rather than just the UK, and how it impacts people of African descent and black Europeans. Well, the United Kingdom was probably the leading country, along with the Netherlands and Sweden, at the European level to promote equality legislation at the EU level. The fact that the United Kingdom is now potentially going to leave the European Union means that we've lost one of the strongest voices at the table to promote equality. What this means in real terms is that equality legislation will struggle to pass equality legislation at the EU level. Now, how does that impact communities of color? Well, in some countries, and my country, I'm very lucky to come from the United Kingdom, we have very good legislation when it comes to equality. We can still do better, but it's much better than a lot of other countries. The problem that happens, and unfortunately, even in our delegation, we have a very Western European delegation. But if you talk to communities of color in Poland, in Hungary, in Lithuania, they don't have the same protections available to us. So the protections we take for granted in employment, in education, in healthcare, they don't have that. But that's where the European Union plays a big role, because it binds the 28 member states to equality legislation in certain areas. Now, there is missing gaps within the legislation, but if we're looking at it from a perspective of what the EU can bring to communities of color, it can really help those communities of color living in Eastern Europe. And we should acknowledge that, and we should say, okay, how do we now, if we're losing the United Kingdom, if the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, which other countries can we push? So that's where we have, politicians from Germany, from Sweden, amongst our delegation. They should be telling their counterparts, but also their ministries, the foreign ministries, that now it's up to you to take the mantle forward, that you need to press forward equality legislation so communities of color and other minority groups are protected. And my last point is this. It touches on the media and politicians. I know, Helen, you're from the Conservative Party, and David Cameron, you're former Prime Minister, called the election. But we can keep on blaming the far right or the extreme right and UKIP and Farage and so on. In the US, you can blame the alt-right movement, Trump. But we also have to understand that our moderate politicians from the center left, from the center right, are also at fault. And I think one thing we haven't done properly is analyze the failure of our politics and the traditional center left and center right in creating this movement on the right. Because if you see, and my last point is this, is that for the last 10 years, 15 years ago, Austria was going to elect a far-right president. And all the European Union member states decided to block and boycott Austria. 15 years later, it's become completely acceptable for far-right politicians to espouse some of the most disgusting views. And our politicians, instead of condemning that, they actually accept it and try to get popular votes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. He is a man to watch. You heard it here first. Okay, so...
Can I just butt in very quickly, please? This man sitting next to me, he's said all very nice, wonderful things to make our heads swell, but do you know, none of us would be where we are without Simon Woolley.
Okay, it's your time now, but I want you to think about how it impacts African Americans. What can you learn from the debacle that we have just been through? You have weeks now before that vote. It's over to you. Yes, please. Is there another microphone? Okay.
Well, I really would just like to know from any of you, how is American politics being currently viewed from a European perspective, particularly for minorities?
Another question?
Hi, my name is Alexa Walker, and I attend Howard University. And I know that we argue a lot about opportunities for African Americans, for minorities in a whole. And so with the Brexit, do you believe that the opportunities, because of the rise of hate crimes and everything like that, have been limited, even more limited for minorities, or can the younger generation make a stance and still be influential as you are today?
Helen, how do we see the American circus?
Okay, well, I mean, I can't speak for the whole of Great Britain, but I know in my family, yeah, I'm being partisan here, but I really, really hope Hillary Clinton does it. I really, really do. And, you know, when you elected Barack Obama, the whole world was proud of America, and we thought, hey, wow, look what you've done. And I'm afraid to say that if you elect Donald Trump, the world is not going to think that way.
We cry, we cry, we cry, we cry. The point that the sister made about how are black people directly affected, I mean, you were brave enough to say, is it an opportunity or is it a curse?
So, I mean, sometimes it takes a crisis, doesn't it, to get people to step up and really be proactive and aggressive. Aggressive's not a wise word, but just about creating opportunity. And it's certainly sharpened our minds when we've seen the consequences of what's happened. So maybe there is something in it. Can I just say, I'm married to an American woman, and the morning of the Brexit vote, her first words was, "Does this mean we're going to get Donald Trump?" And I put that out as a warning because I didn't expect the Brexit vote. We can't take it for granted. And the way it's seen from the UK, it's comedy material, but it's no longer funny.
Just on that opportunities point, I mean, the big one, of course, is that there is going to be considerably reduced free movement and access to the free market. That's the big one. In terms of rights and protections, I think there could be some ramifications for maternity rights, but we've still got the Equality Act, we're still going to be a member of the Council of Europe, we are still going to be accountable to the European Convention on Human Rights, so I would be very surprised if there was a paring back in terms of rights for people from BME backgrounds.
You know, rightly or wrongly, much of the world looks to the USA as a symbol of democracy and stability. And then in one foul moment, you have this man making these outrageous statements. And sensible people say, what is going on in America? Many feel, of course, you can have idiots like Donald Trump, but that's not the problem. The problem is there are millions supporting him. And that is frightening. And that was also frightening for Brexit because I think Helen made the point, and I cannot understate this, when racial hatred, when the type of abuse that we've seen in the 1960s and 70s resurfaces and becomes legitimized, we're all in trouble.
Helen and Marvin touched upon a lot of things, so I don't want to repeat that. I just want to say one thing about what Trump is doing. I believe if you look at it from a policy point of view, the fact that Trump exists in this presidential candidacy is a negative because it deflects from the real issues that actually people of color are facing in America. So for example, in America, not many people in Europe know that you have these laws which basically still have voting segregation. Like different states like Louisiana have these voting laws that affect black Americans. And because we have Trump, we're not talking about these issues, which we should be talking about, because that means that those black Americans living in those states can't even vote.
Last round of questions. So I'm going to take, if it's quick fire and you haven't spoken, you will get the mic.
Thank you. If Brexit does go forward and UK leaves, you're now in the position of developing your own immigration policy. And I'm curious if you have a sense of where that's going to go, if there's going to be a reactionary anti-immigration movement, or if it's an opportunity for you to open it up even more.
Good question. I think I know the answer. You put your
Thanks, Simon. I believe that it was the Hungarian Prime Minister Laszlo that said that the Nazis didn't go far enough with Roma population. And so if you have, Hungarian, Polish folks, other Eastern Europeans facing these problems in the UK, I wondered if there was any opportunity for people to kind of reflect, come together in a broader coalition happening in Europe.
Yeah, I have to travel to the US to have the chance to talk to so many people from the black community. So my question is actually, in your daily work, how do you do it that you actually don't forget to look for the circumstances of people of color and black people? Because actually in Germany, there is no infrastructure. So it's always work that you have to do on top, extra. And how do you make sure that it's not also on your table, if you have it in your mind, it doesn't fall along?
Good question. I'm going to try again.
I just want to emphasize in the phrase, we want to take our country back, that you alluded to the coherence of the privileged. And I wonder why you stop on the boundaries. You ask, what is the link between Trump and the people that Nigel Farage represents? And I remember in the 80s when Le Pen was using the phrase French, France first and all of that, that subsequent to that, there were implications about financial links. And I think of that with Donald Trump because one of the big booster surprises me is his anti-globalism hurts his own Wall Street alliances. And when you add to that some of these parties now get money across the borders and that they meet occasionally, I'm wondering where does the we stop in those claims of we're taking our country back? Is it not a European Union link beyond the boundary?
Good point. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If we have time, I'll come back to you. So,
So on the issue of Viktor Orban and what he had said, how can we bring in those Hungarians or Poles who have been racially abused in the UK and bring them in our coalition? I think there's an opportunity there. I think the fact that, we're having a government like Hungary and Poland talking about racism and xenophobia, it opens a box for us to, engage with them on the issue. The thing is, the people who are actual victims of, racism, Hungarians and Poles, maybe they don't think alike. They would probably perceive that their racism is different to our racism, that, it shouldn't be happening to them, but it should happen to us because we're a different color. So it could be, but one of the things we encourage is to build coalitions, and the coalitions have to be with Roma, Muslims, Jews, Black Europeans, LGBTI, trans, whatever it is. And that's something that we communities of color struggle with because we don't engage with all of those other communities. The other thing I want to say was that in our work, I work for an intergroup against racism, so this is a cross-party group of members of European Parliament. We mainstream anti-racism and diversity policies in all our work. So I can answer that one. And the last thing I want to say is about the gentleman's question over here, but also about politics itself. There's two things I want to criticize that this conference I've heard hasn't really talked about. We keep on talking about discrimination, but why don't we talk about the type of economy we want? Because if we start talking about the type of economy we want, we will see a fundamental change in our society. Right now, the way our economies are based, they give the ability to big corporations to influence politics. And I want to pick up on a fact I heard yesterday. Last thing, I want to pick up on a fact I heard yesterday. It cost the Bush administration's tax cuts gave tax cuts of $3.9 trillion. But to spend money on creating free university education in the US cost $900 billion. So the Bush administration could give $3.1 trillion in tax credits, but couldn't give $900 billion to get young people from America to go to university. So, let's think about the economy one, let's think about who's lobbying. That will make changes in how we fight discrimination and how we can empower communities of color.
I'll try to remember the question. I mean, the stuff they say about being against the establishment and globalization, maybe they just don't mean it. I mean, it's not beyond my wit that they're just saying stuff because they think that that's the mood music people want to hear and they're not going to deliver on it. In terms of our relationship to immigration going into the future, Brexit or no Brexit, I move on that. I'll share a story. My wife is a white American with a US passport. I ask her if she thinks the immigration debate in the UK has anything to do with her. She says no. even though she's on permanent leave to remain. But I think it's got something to do with me, and I'm the one with the English heritage and the British passport. So there's all sorts of dynamics going on there. There's an element which I'm, at the moment, there are groups that are outside me in that hierarchy of belonging, but I know that I'm not in the center circle of that hierarchy of belonging at the same time. And yet I ferociously hold on to my right to be British and to be understood as British. So there's a lot of movement. Where that relationship will be in a number of years, I don't know. If the economy does begin to suffer over the coming years, then it could be that they say, well, the people that led the Leave campaign were lying to us, or it could be that they indulge their misunderstanding all the more and say, well, what we just need to do is do what we said we were going to do more. Stop immigration. And in terms of keeping it at the center, keeping race equality at the center of what we do, I don't have to think about that. It's just what we have to do. It goes back to this fundamental question: what kind of culture, what kind of economy do we want to have?
Helen, final quick word.
I'll just pick up too, because my colleagues have covered it. Just on why, why we do it. How do we, stop ourselves from forgetting? We can't forget it. It goes deep. It goes so deep. It's always there. So it's in my heart, soul, pulse. And so, whatever I'm given to do, I automatically just think, well, where does this put us in terms of equality, fairness, justice? As far as immigration policy is concerned, $6 million question. If I knew what was going to happen, I'd be a very, very wealthy woman. But it's not going to be free for all. It's not going to get more open. It's going to close. It's going to get tighter because of our obsession with reducing it from hundreds of thousands to tens.
It's interesting about the immigration question because, of course, in regards to Europe, we had no control over our borders. People from Europe could come in. But we did have control from everywhere else. And if we wanted to open it up, we could at any time. The fact of the matter is, even when the government said, look, we want the skills, only the skilled people to come in, we couldn't fill those quotas. Those quotas were less than 10% filled. People would go to Germany, people would go to France, people would go to the USA with those skills because they were treated better. And so this idea that you can cut off the borders and pick and choose, frankly, is fanciful. I think that I want to close on somebody said in the audience about is it an opportunity? And Marvin said, actually, there is an opportunity for us out of the mother of necessity. One of those aspects of mother of necessity is that we need to protect ourselves. We need to ensure that we're there on the front line against race, hate, crime. But in that coming together, we can also look at how we build a stronger movement, how we have a greater political voice, how we support each other in our endeavors to change our world. I think we've had a great panel, a great discussion. I'm sorry that it couldn't be longer, those politicians. But it's been a great debate. Thank you all very much. I've just been told that Bristol City Council is looking for a new chief exec.
I'm right in the end of era Obama's talent pool, so if anyone knows it.
Well, get her in or him in, in the next 2 years.